start line some time ago.
I'm just waiting for the word to go. If that's the word to go, all right. I think as we were just told, we just crossed the start line. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Rick Dunning, and as you were told, I've been a firefighter now for way too many years. And I have to tell you, I'm glad to be here to represent an incredible group of men and women who make up our National Defense Fire Service. When I was growing up, my dad often said to me, though, he says, boy, he says, there's two sage pieces of advice I have for you. And he actually did this. This wasn't a joke. He says, the first thing I observe about you, he says, you sure consume a lot of my groceries. I said, thanks, Dad, pass the potatoes. He says, the other thing, he says, I noticed about you, just as I'm heading off onto my own, he says, you know what, boy, your mouth runs like a whippoorwill's arse in mating season. I said, you know what, thanks, Dad. And with those two pieces, those nuggets of advice, off I went into the world, and I find myself often representing the National Defense Fire Service. So I guess I have you for the next 20 minutes. And so anyways, I hope you sit back, enjoy a little bit about what I'm about to present to you. One of the interesting things that I've often been asked, and I find this rather interesting. As I've gone through my career, I've served in all three elements, and 9 times out of 10, now I realize who I'm talking to here, okay? I realize this. 9 times out of 10, it'll be an Army guy who comes up to me and goes, wow, I didn't know we had military firefighters. And you know what? We do. Indeed we do. There's about 550 of us, give or take the day, the week. That number is changing, but approximately 550 of us. And there's about the same number of D&D civilian firefighters. Now those D&D civilian firefighters are just the same as us. We go through the same training, do the same things. The really fundamental difference between a D&D firefighter and a military firefighter is that a military firefighter, we get to deploy, or we have to deploy. That's it. You know, it's all part of that thing that we signed up for. And we're all good for that. And then, you know what we do? We deploy a lot. We're just like a bad rash. We seem to be just little bits of us everywhere, but we're there. One thing I think people are often surprised to learn about the National Defense Fire Service is that we cover the largest territory of any fire department in Canada. We have fire departments on the East Coast, straight through Quebec, Ontario, the prairies, right out to the West Coast. And then going north, we can stand up with our hand on our heart and tell everybody the National Defense Fire Service has got the world's most northern, permanently staffed fire department in the world. And all of you know that as CFS Alert. Those are all military firefighters. So we cover a vast, vast territory. Each year, members of the National Defense Fire Service respond to approximately 9,000 to 10,000 calls for assistance. And we're going to cover a little bit about those. But a lot of people they don't realize just the magnitude of and the degree of which we go out and we serve our bases. We are very busy, make no doubt about it. The vast majority of those calls, which comes in about the 25% mark, are actually medical calls. Did you know that next time you're on a base, if you're walking along and you slip and you fall and, I don't know, you can't get up and you need medical help, it's going to be a firefighter who's going to be there first. From an official, like it'll either be the fire or, and like it won't be a citizen coming by. It'll probably be a firefighter, be it civilian or military. So medical calls are now becoming a big part of what we do. And we get involved in all aspects. I'm proud to say that several of our members have saved many people's lives. They stood between those people going on to the great reward, and we're staying here. So our firefighters, as I stand here and represent them, as I told you at the beginning, I do so with a lot of pride. I don't think a lot of people know about us. So these kinds of venues are really good. All right. Are you flipping the thing or do I? Okay, great. Let's flip it. So I was asked to talk about our history, and all things seem to point to this as the beginning right here. It says, I see Mr. Invention is at it again. We better start holding regular fire drills. We believe our experts, when we've researched this, take it right back to that point. Between that point and now, you can throw in a few buckets of water, a few horses, bales of hay, and the odd crash truck or fire truck, and you pretty much have got our history. Sir, this is as much into the history as I'm going. I hope. Yeah, okay, that's all right. Thank you, sir. So this is it. What you've just got, National Defense Fire Service History 101. Okay, so now I want to get into what I think is the sexy stuff. And this is where you think often of what is it that firefighters do. So here's, in this particular slide, the other thing that Jeff told me I was to do, I need you to know, I need to come clean with these people, is I'm not to make this too academic, and I'm supposed to lie to you. No, I don't. I will tell you what, I will keep the lying to a minimum, okay? But this is the angle that I'm coming at. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the photos that you see. This photo right here was taken in Borden at our firefighting school. You need to know, at one time, not too long ago, our firefighting school was rated against all of the other firefighting schools, not just in Canada, but throughout North America. And it was an American team came in and said, we place you as second in all of North America in terms of the quality of training and teaching that you do. I was teaching at the time, and you know what? That had a really profound effect on me. I thought, okay, maybe we're doing something right. You know how it is as an instructor. So this is a good photo because it shows a little bit of our training area, but there's three distinct things I want to point out. Look at this. I forgot I had this thing. First of all, you see the D&D firefighter. This is a civilian right here. This is a military guy. The other thing you should note is look at that thing right there. You betcha. You know, it's men and women that make up our team. And let me tell you something about the women who make up our fire service. I was the RCAF fire marshal, and I looked after all of the bases across the Air Force. And then we got a lot of them. Bar none, and I know I'm being taped, so if anybody challenges me on this, bar none, the best fire chief that I had was a woman out in Dundurn. So the ladies in our team play a very fundamental role. They're 100% part of our team, and you know what? We're really glad to have them. Okay, slide. All right, so I thought I'd put this one up first. Fire inspection. Now here's the thing. Fire inspection isn't really sexy stuff, okay? You don't get a lot of posters of fire inspectors, you know, going around checking like extension cords, stuff like that. You don't get a lot of that. But let me tell you something. If it was not for our fire inspectors, our fire engineers, our fire technologists, you know those 10,000 calls a year we go to? That'd probably be a whole lot more. And us in the National Department of National Defense, you know, we always say that we defend democracy. We're not a democracy. Well, us firefighters use that line a lot. So when we go into somebody's building and we say, see that cord right there? You got to move it. And they go, well, you don't have to move it. Well, that's where we defend democracy, we're not a democracy line comes in. So we get to make sure, and we make people comply with the rules and regulations that keep people safe. And consequently, our number of fires we go to have dropped substantially, but our medical calls are going up. So I don't know what that says. But anyways, they are our first line of defense. And without them, we'd all be in a lot more trouble, I'm here to tell you. Great slide. Crash rescue. A lot of times when people are thinking of military firefighters, this is what they think of, right here. You know, anything to do with aircraft, and indeed, this is a big part of what it is we do. So typically, but not exclusively, it's military firefighters who look after the airfields. However, on a number of Army bases, we get the civilian firefighters providing this kind of protection as well. It's very important. This is very important work. These are all photos. These are all actual Canadian aircraft. And they're not old photos. We get called to the airfield all the time. All the time. We are being pulled out to the airfield. And it's everything from, it could be a pilot sees a little chip in the cockpit and he declares an emergency, out we go, to the pilot is losing consciousness and he's trying to bring his fighter in and he hits the cables, a big cable across the runway, and it drags his fighter to a stop, and we clamber up and pull him out. Those things happen. Those things happen all the time. When I was putting this together, the chief warrant officer in my office came up and he started laughing. He goes, "Oh yeah," he says, "I just had a call with a Dutch F-16 fighter." He says, "The pilot was rolling along on the just on the ramp up in Coal Lake, and you know what? He had a water bottle inside his cockpit with him, and he decided he needed to have a drink of water at that precise moment. So the jet, the F-16 is rolling along, and he thought, well, okay, this is a good time. So he reaches down, and he kind of forgot, I guess, that he was in a jet, and the jet was moving. And it rolled right off the hard surface, pump into the grass. So we get these kinds of calls all the time. Bird strikes. Those are very, very, very serious. Very serious indeed. To, you know, engines out, to airplanes crashing into each other onto the ground, aircraft crashing on the ground, you name it. Boy, we're involved with that. Okay, slide. Forest fires. Now when I say forest fires, I bet you a lot of people are probably thinking in terms of bases. They're thinking of like little bush fires. Well, we do those too. We definitely do those. But we have some bases that actually specialize as forest firefighters. Petawawa is one of them. Petawawa is probably the leading base in the National Defense Fire Service that provides not bush firefighting, full-up forest firefighting. That's it. They're up in the helicopters. They're moving our troops around, our firefighters on the ground around to engage this problem. The challenge, though, if you can imagine, if you're dealing with something like this, the challenge the National Defense firefighters have that quite often civilians don't is they're in military training areas. And what's in military training areas? All kinds of unexploded ordnance. I was talking with the fire chief of Petawawa not too long ago, and I asked him how his firefighting was going on. And he's having a particularly bad year out in the training area. He says, "Hey Rick, let me show you a photo. I should have kept it. I could have shown you." One of his guys went out, and they're right out in the training area. Anyways, the fire rolled over. I don't know whether it was a shell or what it was. Anyways, this thing blows up. And actually, the shrapnel took out the lights on the vehicles the guys were in. That's how close they were. This is how this goes. So forest firefighting, we do it. And I'm very proud of the job the guys do there. They do a top-notch job. Next. Deployed operations. As I told you, we're just like that bad rash. We're not the main force going in by a long shot, but we always play a role whenever we deploy. That role could be, we just send in a couple fire inspectors to go in, check out a camp, make sure it's safe. That could be the case. Quite often it is. Other times, we send in a number of firefighters to go in, and they provide structural protection, crash protection, medical protection, car accident protection, armored vehicle extrication protection. So this right here, this is just one of our air transportable crash trucks. This crash truck, within 4 hours from being given the word to go, can be stripped down and driven right into the back of our Hercules and then flown wherever in the world it needs to go. We used that during Op Hestia in Haiti, and that's exactly how we got our crash protection down to the airfield down there, using exactly this right here. We pulled it out of actually the Rocky Mountains. It was providing support for a podium, which was of course to the Olympics. And we had a number of our personnel scattered throughout the different locations, and we needed that crash truck for what happened down in Haiti. So we loaded her up in a Herc and away she went. We do this quite often, actually. This is somewhere overseas. I don't know where. This is in Haiti again. Shortly after the earthquakes hit, we ended up deploying 20 military firefighters down to Haiti. The role that they ended up being tasked with was completely unique for us. We had never done this before. They were going to actually go in and do a form of urban search and rescue. Their task was to go in and try and locate as many Canadian deceased as possible. The idea being that they would get those bodies back home and those families be able to have a form of closure. You know what? Our guys and gals went down there, and they ended up recovering 19 Canadian deceased. And they put themselves at peril an awful lot. This lady right here, she's a corporal firefighter at the time at 8 Wing Trenton. She got deployed down to Haiti. She ended up being awarded the Meritorious Service Medal. So one of the stories goes about her, if you can imagine, we all saw in the media all the flattened buildings. Our guys, and you'll see a photo in a few minutes of just how tight of spots our firefighters were crawling into these flattened buildings. They had to dig little tunnels, and they'd go in and they're looking for what they had to find. This young lady, she went in at one point. A bunch of buildings had pancaked down on top of each other. They knew that there was a target inside. They just didn't know where. Apparently, she disappeared. All of a sudden, she was gone. What she had done was she had actually found a little spot in this pancake of dirt and grime, and she started making her way through this at great peril. I'm sure her boss at the time would never have allowed her to do this, because all it would have taken was another tremor, and you know what? That would have been game over right there. She would have been flattened like a bug. Anyway, she ended up popping out, way out on the other side, and they were just astounded. What they learned was the target they thought, the person they thought might be in there, wasn't in there. But this was the degree of dedication and I guess just grit to get in there and get the job done that some of our personnel have. I often, when I'm public speaking, like to refer to her because of the job she did, but also just to reinforce how important the women in our trade actually are. Okay, slide. Warships. Wow. So we actually send, and we still are sending firefighters on warships. This is about to change in the next couple of years, and we won't be sending military firefighters warships anymore. The reason for that is because the warships now are becoming more modern, and they don't need as many personnel on board, so it gives a chance for people to, like commanders, to double up tasks. So anyways, us firefighters are off, and I have to tell you there's not a whole lot of phone calls I'm receiving of people crying about that. So, but nonetheless, this is what we've done. I was a senior firefighter on board the sister ship of this one right here, which was HMCS Iroquois. And HMCS Iroquois is this ship right here. And I can tell you, I spent a long time on that deck right there. Shortly after I left, a Sea King was coming in and hammered in on the deck. And so this is exactly what we would do. That kind of stuff, plus we provided medical support, plus we provided, you'd be surprised how many times ships catch fire. So you know what, we provided support to that as well. Okay. Medical. Like I told you, boy, when I think back on my time as a military firefighter, or when I was a line firefighter, this was a big part of our job. And we get called to all manners, and it's just crazy what people can get themselves into. It's really rare. I found, here's a little bit of wisdom you can take away. This kind of hit me one night, and I thought, very rarely do us firefighters ever get called because somebody did something brilliant. It hasn't happened yet. I'm sure it's going to happen, and when it does happen, I want to be there. But so quite often, people are just being people too. I make a little bit of fun of this, but oftentimes people, being human, get themselves into situations like we all do, and they need a little bit of help, and we're glad to come in there and help them out. Where it gets to be a problem, though, is quite often you have a crew of about 5 or 6 guys on, and all of a sudden you get, and this happens more times than you can imagine, an F-18 will call in saying, I've got an engine out. At the same time, this actually happened. I'm just hesitating because I'm just relapsing this. At the same time, some guy drove his pickup truck into a pole. At the same time, little Mrs. Jones in the P&Q's baby started choking on a bone. This all happened at once. You can just imagine that poor sergeant or warrant officer going, okay, yeah, how are we going to deal with this? But we dealt with it. But these kinds of things happen. So medical calls, big part of what it is we do. Okay? This is what most people think of as firefighting. Right here, we call it structural firefighting. And all these photos right here are all off of military bases. And once again, these are fairly recent photos. And so all of our bases provide the crash protection, but we also provide protection to our structures. The number I was told, now I'm talking to a room of engineers here. Well, sorry to you infantry guys. I meant that with all respect. Of course, you're part of the family now. We have something like $26 billion worth of infrastructure. That's the number I was told. That's a lot of infrastructure that our firefighters are protecting. And every now and then, things go wrong. Be it living quarters, be it buildings, it all happens. Just recently, we just had in Gagetown, a soldier went and parked his vehicle inside of a great big hangar-looking kind of an affair. It was all full of combat vehicles, which I'm sure aren't very cheap. Through the night, the battery failed on this truck. The truck caught on fire. Luckily, the sprinkler system engaged, held the fire till the firefighters came in and put it out. Had we not had that system set up, the cost to replace that was $120 million. So, and we, of course, many of you may be aware, we lost a building in Quebec not too long ago, the Quebec Armories, and we took that one right in the teeth at $120 million. So our firefighters are protecting a lot of valuable infrastructure. Okay, slide. This is the urban search and rescue. Quite often, I don't know, is it something that happens with age? Like I find that when I'm lying in bed sometimes and I think back on different things that never used to bother me, it kind of grabs, and it wakes you up. It's doing this kind of stuff right here that you find yourself just crunched up in a little ball like this and you realize there's no help. You figure out how you're going to get out or you're stuck. So whenever I look at this photo, I'm reminded of some of the really tight spots we have found ourselves in. I found myself in, and it can be quite alarming, to be honest with you. This photo was taken of one of our firefighters in Haiti, and this shows you can see all the debris down here of a flattened building, and this firefighter and his team had to dig this out, and in they went. At any moment, it could have got a tremor, it could have begun to rain. If it rained, this would cause some slippage, and it could have been game over. We showed some of these photos to the heavy urban search and rescue teams in Toronto. We said, yeah, this is what our guys are doing. And this guy says to me, he says, I say this with all respect. And I'm going, okay, brace for shock. He says, do you think you could give me some of those photos like this right here? I'd like to have some of those photos because this is where the respect part comes in. I want to show our team members not what to ever do. I said, by all means, hey, we're all on the same team, right? So there was a lot of that. And remember I referred back to Corporal Pilon? Well, this is what she took off inside of. Can you imagine all the darkness, uncertainty, and through there she went. Very, very proud of these people. Okay, slide. So this is a part where Jeff asked me to tell you some kind of a weird story that happened to me. So this is the remnants of a natural gas explosion. This is bad stuff. It is bad stuff. So one day, we received a call. This lady called up, and I was not in the alarm room, okay? I was actually the guy leading the attack whenever we had a problem. That was my role at that point. This lady called up in the evening, be like 10 o'clock, and she says, my house is filling up with natural gas. Well, that's not good. That's a bad thing. We said, Roger, onto the truck she went. Off we went. And as we're rolling up there, I'm getting all up into my kit, and I'm thinking about what I have to do. I'm going through a number of steps as we're getting closer. We rolled into this house, and there's a number of houses side by side. And as I rolled up, I said, okay, there's a house right there. I see the address. We stopped, flicked on the flashlight out, we went, and I'm all kitted out like you see. Up, my partner and I went to the house, knocked on the door, and to this day, I still have trouble believing what I was about to see. Now, this was a house where a lady phoned saying, my house is filling with natural gas. So when I knocked on the door, opened the door, what did I see? This lady standing there with a cigarette in her mouth like this. So this little burst of horror goes through me, and I think, oh man, I went to the wrong house. So I took a step back, flashed my flashlight on the address. If this is the right street, this is the right address. I said, ma'am, are you the person who called in that your house is filling with natural gas? She said, oh yeah. I'll tell you what we're going to do there, ma'am. You're going to walk out of your house now, and you're going to put the cigarette. I often wonder, what the heck was she doing? Again, rarely do we get called because somebody did something smart. We had a time where, those great big cylinders full of propane that you often see outside of trailers and stuff like that. So on some of our bases, we used to have trailers. So one time in a very, very cold snap, his gas stopped running to his trailer. So what's a guy to do? I mean, it's cold outside. He's got to look after his family, right? So what's he going to do? So here's a guy thinking outside the box. So he goes out to this great big cylinder, and it's huge. And those cylinders, when they go, you don't even have that left over. It just flattens everything. So anyways, out he goes, and he tromps down the snow all the way around this great big cylinder. He tromps her all down like this. Now the other neighbors are kind of eyeballing this guy going, oh, I wonder what he's going to do. I bet you they never guess what he's about to do. So then he disappears back to his place, and he pulls out a whole bunch of lengths of wood. I don't know, 1 by 4 by 6 feet kind of idea. Anyways, he brings us all back to this big cylinder, and we've got photos. I just don't have the photos with me. I saw the photos. He came back, and he kind of stacked the wood, if this is the cylinder, he kind of stacked the wood all the way along the side like this, and all the way around like that. Now the guy's thinking, okay, we got to give him some credit. He's thinking, it stopped flowing because it's too cold. So I'll just heat up my tank a little bit. Oh. So this guy then, he puts the wood all out, and the neighbors now are really watching because this guy's going to do something really brilliant or they're leaving town. So anyways, he starts to light the fire, and indeed he lit the fire. So now the fire is starting to build around this pressurized cylinder. Now this is not a happy moment for anybody. Anyways, we went and we put it all out. It was not a big deal. We went just kick snow on it, put it all out. But you know what? You gotta ask yourself, maybe you should have YouTubed it or something like that. But that would have been a really bad scene. Okay, slide. We do the combat challenge. This is where our men and women get to go out and they compete against firefighters from literally all over the world. And it's a great morale booster, and they love doing this kind of stuff, and that's good on them. Next. It just simply says, know your history, share your history, we've earned it. That's all it says. That's it, folks. Do you have any questions about the National Defense Fire Service? Yes, sir.
Came first. You said that your training unit came second. At the beginning, you were talking about you were running the training in Camp Borden, and your unit placed second in all of North America.
Oh, hey, good. I don't know. Yeah, I have no idea. I forget. I was just so hung up on that. Like wow. We came. Do you know how many schools there are out there? There's tons of schools out there, and that. So I don't know if that still stands. But when I was teaching, and not because I was teaching, yeah, that's because I was teaching there. No, I don't know if it still stands, but it stood then. And I'll tell you what, it had a profound effect on us. So I don't remember who came first, but we came second. Hey, yes?
Why are there, or what is the advantage of having civilian firefighters integrated with the military firefighters?
Well, us military firefighters apparently were expensive. And so I'm told it's, and you know, really, and it's the truth, because military firefighters get posted. You have to pay for the postings. You know, we're being moved around all the time. We're civilian firefighters, a young man or woman can show up to that fire hall and they can do an entire career in that very fire hall. There's a lot of advantages to having civilian firefighters. You know, they get to know the base. Us military guys, every time we get posted to a new spot, we've got to learn the base, learn the nuances, stuff like that. Our civilian colleagues, and they do whole careers. They know that base inside and out. They know the people. So it's a good mix. And we're not the only military that does this. The U.S. forces do the same thing. As a matter of fact, they mix their fire halls. So you'll have some military guy serving shoulder to shoulder with a female firefighter. So we're not unique by a long shot. But us military guys, we give the Canadian Forces, or the government, that ability to deploy firefighters where we wouldn't put civilians. Yes, sir?
Yeah, do you specialize between land, sea, and air, so you're all cross-trained, or do people tend to take a career path that's particularly Air Force or Navy or whatever?
No, at this point in time, we're able to go, we call ourselves a purple trade. We're able to go wherever it is we need. We have, like for military firefighters, we have firefighters on an Army base in Edmonton. It's a full military fire hall. All the other Army bases are filled with D&D civilians. Our naval bases, the actual hard base itself, are civilians. However, our warships have military guys on them. And all of our Air Force bases are military, except for one, which is Dundurn, which is civilian.
So what's the size of the trade altogether? How many you got, 1,000?
Yeah, about 1,000-ish. Yeah, that's about right. That's about right. Yes, sir.
Public Safety Canada used to run an organization called HUSAR.
Yes.
They don't do it anymore.
Yes. Yes.
So they used to run some pretty intensive exercises where they actually took old buildings and
Flatten them.
well, they didn't actually flatten them, but there was a hotel in Toronto, for example, that was due for demolition, and they asked the guy who was doing it to stop for a couple of days so they could practice. Did your guys ever participate in any of the USAR teams across Canada?
I'm not sure if that's a loaded question or not, because I know there's.
It's not loaded.
Oh, okay. No, I know there was some tough feelings there when we started getting into the urban search and rescue side of things from our civilian colleagues. To answer your question, absolutely, you bet. We trained a lot with the heavy urban search and rescue teams, Task Force 1 through 5. Primarily Task Force 3 out of Toronto and Task Force 4 out of Brandon, Manitoba. We trained a lot with those guys. We often sent our firefighters, our military guys, across Canada to train with these folks, and down into the States as well. And down in the States, and when I said they flatten buildings, they actually flatten their buildings, and our guys crawl in around.
HUSAR is a service no longer being provided by the federal government, no longer paid for. Who's paying for it now?
So this is, you know, that's a really, it's a touchy subject when you're talking to the men and women who are impacted by this. So I can tell you for sure, with Task Force 3 out of Toronto, Task Force 4 out of Brandon, Manitoba, they're relying on provincial funds or municipal funds. But you were right, it used to be federal, and then the sky fell, and so this is how this goes. And but we provide what we call a light urban search and rescue capability, and but we can integrate with the heavy guys whenever, like we can go back and forth, and like I was saying to this gentleman right here, we stand side by side. Like you can have a military guy, a civilian guy, a military guy. They're all part of the same section. Firefighters, off they go to execute a task somewhere. Yeah.
Thanks, Rich.
Oh, you're welcome. Great question. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Rick, very clear that your firefighters have a tremendous number of skill sets. Is one of those smoke jumpers?
No. We get asked. I'm an ex-jumper myself, and so quite often we get people coming up and they ask that very question. But no, we have nobody. And in reference to the forest firefighting, no. But if you know anybody who can get that going, like I'm game. Yeah, throw me in, coach. Absolutely. Great question. Yes, sir.
Smoke jumping.
What's smoke jumping? That's when you smoke just before you leap, just like your last smoke. That's when, like during forest firefighting, there may be a circumstance where you have to put a small force of firefighters into a specific area. The only way you can get them in is by parachute. So they fly over and these guys bail out, land on the ground, do their thing. But I'll tell you what, all I'd have to say is we're thinking of bringing on smoke jumping, and you know those guys aren't calling me about being part of the Navy anymore. They'd be calling me about that. Yeah. Anything else, folks? All right, thank you very much, and remember, hug a firefighter. Thank you. Who owns this right here?